leaders who have significantly contributed to the economic growth of the nation. These events are being hosted in virtual mode. Today, we are all here for an industry meet on petroleum, and I'm very proud to be a part of such an august gathering. The speakers of the day are stalwarts in their own area of expertise in petroleum refining sector and have amassed a great amount of experience through so many years of hard work. Recently, a week ago, the Cabinet approved India's updated NDCs to be communicated to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. This approval translates Prime Minister's Panchamrit announced at COP26 into enhanced climate targets, which is a step towards achieving India's long-term goal of reaching net zero by 2070. As per the updated NDC, India now stands committed to reduce emissions intensity of its GDP by about 45% by 2030 from 2005 level and achieve about 50% cumulative electric power install capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy resources by 2030. It also represents the framework for India's transition to cleaner energy. In this scenario, where every sector is aggressively taking decisions and providing commitment to meet the goals set forward for a safe future, we are here today to understand how a core industry like a petroleum refining sector is gearing itself for its transition. I once again warmly welcome and thank our erudite speakers of the day, Mr. Raman Pucha from CHT, Mr. Pramod Kumar from HPCL, Dr. Reshmi Manna from IOC R&D, and Mr. Abhairaj Singh from Bina Refinery for their kind acceptance for our invitation. Thank you very much, sir and ma'am. I now request our director, Dr. Anjan Ray, to provide his opening remarks and set the floor open. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Bhavya. Once again, a very warm welcome to our distinguished speaker panel. It is almost 50 years now, as we celebrate the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, that the oil companies in India were nationalized in the 1970s, between 74 and 76 mostly. Petroleum being one of the major sources of energy for India, the others being coal and natural gas. And of the three, natural gas is relatively recent on the horizon. These primary energy sources have been the drivers of progress because it can be seen very clearly in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That number 7 goal, energy, affordable and clean energy, more accurately, underpins not only energy access, but also underpins sustainable living. If you don't have energy, if you have to go collect firewood, you lose opportunity in terms of man hours available for productive work. If you cook in a highly smoky room or space, the health impact causes a loss in economic value because you will either be impaired from a health point of view and less productive, or you will have to spend very limited precious resources on treatment. If your light is not on at night, children cannot study easily. We have known of our own leaders in the country who have had to study by the light of a lamp at night. And today, the India of 2022 is very different in energy reality terms from the India of 1947. Yet, we also know that with great power or great energy comes great responsibility. We are a country where our climate targets and the Panchamrit that Dr. Bhavya referred to are imperatives. They are not just options. They have to be done. They have to be done not only for the country and for its citizens, but also for the planet. In this transition from a petroleum-driven energy economy to a more integrated energy economy, we have here some of the thought leaders of the country. Before we start talking about alternative fuels and alternative energy, the lowest hanging fruit is energy efficiency. Produce more energy with less energy, or produce lower carbon energy with whatever we already have to produce and sell. Given that energy demand in the country, and particularly liquid and gaseous fuels demand, will continue to grow at significant rates of between 4 to 7% over the next 10 to 15 years, The strategies of our thought leaders here, whether it is HPC Green R&D, who have over the last few years set new benchmarks in terms of reorienting a company's R&D strategy, or IOCL R&D, who have moved IOCL rapidly towards an integrated energy company, or the Bina refinery of BORL, which has the added benefit of insights from its joint venture partner in Oman, one of the world's fastest moving sustainable economies, and CHT, the government's autonomous body that funds energy transition projects and has been at the forefront of anchoring energy R&D for the last several years. With this distinguished panel, I would probably not want to say more, except that we would seek that you highlight not only the transitions that are happening and what you are doing, but also the challenges before your individual organizations and the nation, and ways in which dialogues like these can be made more meaningful to the audience out there, which consists of policymakers, students, professors, citizens at large, activists, and of course, oil and gas industry professionals. With that, I hand it back to Dr. Bhavya to introduce the speakers and call upon them one by one. Thank you. Dr. Bhavya.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for your words of welcome and for setting up the stage for the discussions. Our first speaker of the day is Mr. Raman Pucha from CHT. Mr. Raman is a graduate in chemical engineering from SVU College of Engineering, Tirupati, Andhra Pradesh. He's been a part of the company for almost 35 years. He began his service in the erstwhile CRL in the manufacturing department and then worked in the Oil Coordination Committee, which is now the PPAC, during the period from 1995 to 2000. He's worked in international trade, supply chain optimization departments of BPCL before joining as a director in CHT in 2019. His work experience includes commissioning of aromatic recovery units as a part of Team BPCL's major venture into crude oil procurement activities, shipping activities like COA with SEI, setting up risk management desk, etc. Implementation of selection of crude procurement through the LP model, first oil PSU in India, implementation of advanced optimization in crude selection process. He has also facilitated procurement of spot crude oils through the Shell trading desk. In CHT, he is looking after the benchmarking studies, refinery improvement programs, and implementation of the PM G1 Yojana scheme. Sir, I request you to kindly start your presentation.
Ma'am, thank you for the address. I will share my presentation. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
My screen is visible? Yeah, today recent advances in petroleum refining, this is the topic, and what are the challenges ahead. So my speech contains refining industry overview, primary energy demand scenario, refining capacity projections in India, what are the challenges, refinery integration and the key for future sustainability, and my conclusion, where we have to go. So refining industry overview, this is the Indian map, all the coastal area across the Indian refineries are set up. You can see from West Coast, predominantly in West Coast, East Coast also now coming up with big refineries. And Northeast has small refineries. And if you see the capacities of Indian refining started in 1901 at the Digboy refinery, 0.5 million metric tons. That has increased to 0.7. Subsequently, we have progressed so many refineries. HPCL Mumbai's second refinery in India, 1954 started. Subsequently, BPCL MR. And currently, it is a Paradeep with the newest refinery started in 2015. So some of the refineries do not have economy of scale like in Northeast, but they are modern and complex. They are meeting all the BS6 compliance of the fuels. And Nelson Complexity Index also varying highest at 21.2, and all the PSU refineries averaging around 9 complexity factor, which indicates the complex nature of the secondary units processing in the refinery. They can convert feed to products. So if you see the fuel quality environment, we have started in 1991, started monitoring the sulfur of 2000 ppm in MS and 1% in HSD. Gradually, in over 30 years, we brought down to 10 ppm. And CTN also has increased 51, and RON from 87, it gone to 91. The investment in refining sector, up to BS3, we have invested 35,000 crores, and BS3 to BS4 alone 25,500. From 50 ppm to 10 ppm, we have invested 34,000 crores in oil sector. So basically, sulfur we have taken care. Now the environmental consideration. Now the main objective is to remove carbon from your operations. We only require hydrogen in future. So primary energy product demands, as per BP, we have now current 2019, coal is 54, total is 14 million tons of oil equivalent. Coal consisted of 55%, crude oil 30%, renewable 3.6%, and others 11.7%. So this is expected to bring down 1839 in 2050. Coal has to come down to 5%, and for sustaining our operations in energy environmental crisis, crude oil has to come down to 5%, and renewable 69. So there is a problem of renewable availability and sustainable basis. We have to go to nuclear for sustain our energy demands, and others went to 21.1%. Next, I'll go to primary energy as per the IEA. This is the 2019, we have 900 metric tons of oil equivalent in primary energy. So they have different scenarios they are projected. One is steps, that is a sustainable energy stated policy scenario. And this is because of COVID, they have introduced one more scenario, delayed recovery in the post-pandemic. And Indian vision is the third one. And other one is the most optimistic. That is sustainable development scenario, where you have to meet all the agreements and to meet the environmental chances and all those things. In this all four scenarios, oil demand, which is around 230, is going to increase, except in the last scenario, marginal increase. So there will be oil demand up to 2040 for oil Indian oil sector. As per IEA. These are the different policy scenarios I explained. Then refining capacity projections. We are now at present 251 MMT per annum. So with approved plans, we are reaching around 300 by 2025. And our demand required will be 400 metric tons by 2030 and 510 by 2040. As such, we are in surplus in refining capacity. We are exporting products. We want to maintain that lead position in exporting the oil to rest of the world. So there will be 2.06 lakhs crores investment is required for going up to 400 metric tons capacity by 2030. So what are the challenges? So volatile crude prices and cracks, sustaining refining margin and profitability. Our friends may be aware in the oil industry, now all the oil companies have declared huge losses. And issues of water availability and land for new refineries, that is also one of the major issue. And building flexibility, fuel versus petrochemicals. The fuel demand is shrinking and petrochemical demand is increasing. And climate changes, we have to meet the climate requirement. So we have to, emissions from our operations have to be reduced. So we have to divert into green hydrogen, biofuels, SCNG, etc. And disruptive technology, what is the impact on oil demand, which is a long-term threat to the oil refineries. So if you see price volatility, it is hovering around 140 and now again come to above 100 in sustained post-pandemic. So refineries are more competitive when crude prices are low. When it is high, then they have a problem because of prices are uncontrolled. We are not passing the full price to the customers because of the developing economy, and our consumers also, government is very sensitive to increasing the prices and passing on to the customers. So sustaining refinery margins and profitability in current scenario is typically refinery accounts 6 to 10% of its fuel and loss, and reducing this will be make profitability. So we have benchmarking study of all the PSU refineries. There is equivalent of $1.08 benefit existing by reducing the energy intensity. The most energy efficient product have small steam systems. We have very big steam systems, steam-driven turbines and all those things. So that has to be reduced, and we have to go for power systems. So fresh water also, we are not recovering the low energy from the waste heat streams that we are letting in cooling towers and going to the atmosphere. All energy intensity index, that is a measurement of energy consumed by the refinery, there is a 35 units is possible we are rejecting into cooling water. If that is recovered, we have huge scope for increasing our margins. So 1% change in steam system changes AI by 0.9 points. An integrated approach to reduce water, steam and fuel consumption will help refineries to improve their profitability. Second, water crisis, where our refineries consume 70 to 170%, depending on their location, more than crude throughput. For 1 ton of crude, we require 0.7 to 1.7, that means. So you are aware water is more scarce in coming future. So we have to use, there is pressure on industry to recycle water and minimize fresh water makeup. We have seen the refineries are putting up desalination plants and MRPL, CPCL, and there is even in Mumbai also there is a huge water cuts for refineries when summer comes. So this is also one of the challenge for refineries. So there is a petrochemical growth. Oil is growing at 0.9%, crude oil. We see from the gap, and petrochemicals, there is a cumulative growth of 2.8. There is a scope for changing from fuel from refinery to petrochemicals, which is faster than energy, the growth of petrochemical. Next, if you see per capita consumption of India is lowest, and it is one of the big developing economy. So there will be further scope for increasing the petrochemical production from the refineries. So there is a growth is 3.2. So there, if you see different sectors, shipping is growing at 0.6 and passenger vehicles 1.6, and petrochemicals 3.2. Oil demand growth. That's sorry. Somebody sharing other. Hello.
Sir, can you please reshare it, sir? I think somehow it's got cut. We're not able to see your slides now.
Yeah, there is a growth in petrochemicals.
Yeah, yes, sir. Now we can see your slide.
Yeah, there is a need for integrating refinery with petrochemical. Since oil, there is a growth in petrochemicals. And if you see climate changes, as you are aware that there is a last decade or something, 17 of 18 warmest years in the record wave since 2001. 410 ppm CO2 concentration is the highest level in CO2. The rate of ice mass loss in Antarctica has tripled in the last decade. Global sea level rises in the last century has been about 8 inches. However, these are the impacts to the refineries, because refineries emit scope 2 emissions more. They also have, there will be pressure on refinery for the operations. The scope 3 emissions, whatever fuel they sell in the retail outlets or consumers, there is a scope 3 emissions. If there is a pressure on refineries to reduce their energy intensity, Indian refineries by design or this one, they are consuming more energy than their peers in the world. So there is schemes are coming perform achieve targets. So refineries are participating in this, and they have to improve their energy intensity. They have to reduce their energy consumption on their own operations. So this will help them to sustain till 2040. So sustain their operations. And decarbonization is one of the other next step. They have to use green hydrogens or electricity, solar, wherever is possible in their operations. And disruptive technologies impact, and there is a long-term threat on electric vehicles. We know that will be 23.1% that is growing, and there are some countries are announcing they are going to stop this fossil fuel driven vehicles. And India also thinking, some statements are coming now and then from different ministries. And the hydrogen also is the next on radar. So some of the advanced countries like Australia, Japan, they're looking for ammonia, methanol, and other low carbon this one. So this is also long-term threat to the oil refineries. Now, what are the opportunities and pathways for the refineries? So there's a refinery integration is a key to future sustainability. You have to align with biorefineries, petrochemicals. You have to align with hydrogen and feed diversification. So you have to improve the for sustaining your operation in near future. So petrochemicals, as you there are different products which is required, and this refinery gives excellent feedstocks for this production of petrochemicals. So we have indicative IRR of typical standalone refinery 11 to 12%. If it is integrated with petrochemicals, 16 to 17%. Most of the PSUs started with fuel refineries because there's an obligation to meet the customer requirement. So now with the fuel demand is shrinking, then we have opportunity till next 2 decades to increase the intensity of petrochemicals from our refineries. And refinery, biorefinery, government has started at the mandate for increasing the ethanol in the MS, blending ethanol in MS. By 2030, had to 25% and 5% biodiesel in the 2030. So biorefinery, you have to use biomass, treat and process lactic acid from C6 sugars, so lactic acid, PLA, petrochemical, or ethanol is the route. These two are, you can blend into MS, and then you can reduce the energy requirement, import requirement from of the country. So then feedstock diversification, you have a feed, we are using petrochemical, normally we're going to P. So to avoid this one, you can diversify residue into solvent deasphalting unit. You produce deasphalting oil. It will be used for a FCC hydrocracker unit as a feedstock. And this pitch can be gasified, and then we'll have whole set of hydrogen production or methanol or fertilizers, ethanol. This is the next integration of refineries with changing in the feedstock diversification. Then hydrogen economy. You are aware hydrogen, green hydrogen, now it is a buzzword in the world. You have to produce from natural with electrolysis of water, and whatever CO2 you have to capture, or hydrogen production you have to produce with green hydrogen with CO2, whatever is captured, you have to produce ethanol or fuels or chemicals or fertilizers for sustaining the operations. So in conclusion, what refineries are, you have to diversify into biofuels. You have to produce sustainable aviation fuels. This is also one of the requirements. Now India, it is in 2026, the Paris agreement is there. Future, we have to meet the aviation also, green aviation also have to produce. And hydrogen is one of the area. So by 2047, India will be independent of energy independence. So for this, we have to look into biofuels, hydrogen, and then coal gasification to methanol. We have huge resource of coal, so that will be sustained. You have to make methanol and use for substituting the oil and gas. In refinery, you have at present some of the refineries are still using furnace oil or LSHS. That has been changed to gas to reduce their scope emissions to scope 2 emissions. And there are leak in SMR. This one you have to identify methane leakage and through digital intervention. Subsequently, it's captured for use as a fuel. And solar, wind, wherever it's possible, you have to use in our refineries. And integration with petrochemicals, so we already started, stated that this is the, even if you divert into petrochemicals, your scope 3 emissions will come down compared to instead of producing fuels, petrochemicals will reduce the intensity of operations. So high severity FCC and petrochemical feedstock, and in fact there are technologies available, and ethanol blending already started by 20% ethanol petrol by 25-26, and CBG is another option. Thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Raman. Dr. Bhavya, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for such a comprehensive presentation, which talks about the opportunities and the threats that we have in this transitioning scenario. We will now move on to our next speaker, Mr. Pramod Kumar from HPCL. Mr. Pramod Kumar is the Deputy General Manager in Corporate R&D Center of Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited, Bangalore, India. He has more than 21 years of experience in process design, research, engineering, and technical services in the area of FCC, thermal cracking, biomass pyrolysis, carbon nanotubes, crude to chemicals, etc. He holds an MTech degree in chemical engineering from IIT Kanpur. He has been responsible for the commercialization of FCC feed nozzle, catalytic visbreaking process, high olefin FCC catalyst. He holds more than 15 patents in various areas of research. The floor is now open to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the nice introduction. Hope my slide is visible. I am audible.
Yes, sir. Your slide is visible and you're audible as well.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So I thank first IIP to giving me an opportunity to present my views on the recent advancement in petroleum refining. What is the challenging going ahead? So if we see this, India is the, we know like India is the third largest consumer of the crude oil and the petroleum product globally. And if we see our refining industry has grown complex in the last 20 years due to either the inferior quality of the crude we are processing, crude price volatility, and the environmental regulations. And if we see in the near projections, the demand for the gasoline and the diesels will reduce due to changing behaviors of the consumers and the adoption of the EV and the increased penetration of the biofuels. So in such scenario, petrochemical will play an important role, we know. So there is a lot of integration of the refining and the petrochemicals, and that's the talk of the future integration in the refineries, and we are also talking about crude to chemicals. The right side of the graph, if you see, there are three approaches. One is the accelerated, second is the net zero. So accelerated and net zero are broadly in line with the Paris consistent IPCC scenarios, and new momentum where we will be achieving around minus 20 million barrels per day reduction by 2050. So the new momentum captures the broad trajectory along with the global energy system is currently progressing. So now if we see the timelines, how the different technologies has emerged into the refining industry and where we are progressing. So if we see the scenarios of 1860 to 1920, mainly we had all primary processing units like ADU, VDUs and all. In 1930 to 60, the FCC alkylation, hydrotreating, solvent extractions has come into the picture. Then 1970 to 1990, we have all bottom upgradation units like residue hydrocracking, gasification, dewaxing. From 2005 to 15, the integration of the petrochemicals with the refining and the high severity FCC has come into the picture. From 2015 onwards, there is a talk of all green technologies, biofuels, drop-in fuels, green hydrogen, carbon capture and sequestration. Now 2020 onwards, if we see, there is a lot of talk and the technologies are coming in the areas of crude to chemicals. It can be a deep integration or it could be a direct conversion of the crude to the chemicals. So if we see the current focus of the refining sectors, mostly we are covering into crude to chemical technologies, different catalyst and the materials advancement. There is a lot of intensification on the process and the reactor designs, then the carbon capture technologies, and the going forward, there is a lot of activities or the commercializations are happening in the area of co-processing of the renewables in the refining sector. So I will be subsequently discussing on all these 5 topics. So let's talk about crude to chemicals. So if we see this GDP growth, so if you see the demand of the olefins and the aromatics from 2020 to 2050, the demand is surpassing the GDP. So that means there is a significant demand of the olefins and the aromatics, and that's a key thing for the refining industries to go towards the petrochemicals. The right side figures shows what is the regions of the growth of the petrochemicals. It's the rising GDP, rising middle class income, then unprecedented growth in the Asia Pacific, and the petrochemical growth is more than the GDP growth, followed by the growth in the population. So now going forward, how the refinery integration levels are happening and what are the indicative yields. So broadly, if we see the refining industry, there the petrochemical yields will be very, very less, maybe 4 to 5%. But if there is an integration like refining plus if you put BTX or the propylene, it can go to 10 to 12%. Further integration will lead to refining industry. The naphtha coming from the refinery can go to the steam crackers, or we can have a para-xylene complex that can increase to the petrochemical yield to the slight more, maybe less than around 15%. But if we go to the full integration like refining plus steam cracker plus para-xylene complex, it can go up to 15 to 25% of the petrochemical yields. But the ultimate integration represents which merges all the refining and the petrochemical complex in a more deep integration and elevates the petrochemical production to the refinery from the refinery scales. So there we are talking about the crude to chemicals, which can go to 40 to 80%, and there are currently 2 to 3 licenses which are offering such technology where the yields can reach by deep integrations up to 80%. And in China, there are a lot of complexes which are in operation, wherein from the crude, the yields of the petrochemical are surpassing 55 to 60%. So now if we see the transition path towards petrochemicals, so I will be dealing how the transitions are happening. So one is the FCC. We know like FCC is the main producer of the propylene in the refining industry. So VGO is the feed which can produce light olefins, and if the highly treated VGOs are put into the FCC with a high olefin FCC, so the propylene yield can go to more than 20% on the VGO basis. Then the next level of transition towards petrochemical could be a high olefin FCC plus the naphtha cracker integration, which my previous speaker has also shown in the presentation. Then upgrade those streams in the existing refinery configuration that can yield to the higher yields of the petrochemicals. The third integration, which we called crude to chemical, that means where the yield of the petrochemical is more than 40%. So there, like it could be a steam cracking. There is a plant running in Singapore which takes the light condensate crudes and makes the petrochemicals. Then it could be a catalytic cracking or integration with the hydrocracking and the steam cracking. So now I will be talking little bit about how HPCL R&D is coming into the pictures. Like there is a integration of the petrochemicals. Now what we are working on a technology we call HP coat. Coat means crude to olefins and aromatics technology. So this slide shows about the different units available in the refinery configuration. So if we see the next slides, so we are all talking about, we'll take the crudes and we'll eliminate all the units, and down the line we'll have only one HP code which has been patented by us, which will give directly from the crude to 45% of the petrochemical yields. So we'll not have any CDUs and VDUs, and whatever the gasoline and diesel will come, that will go for a mild treatment. So the refinery configuration will look very, very simple, having 2 units into the configuration other than the treating units. So next topic is about the catalyst advancement. So we all know about the production of the clean fuels. We moved from 1991 with the mass emission to BS 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6. Now we are all talking about bulk metal catalyst towards nebula or Celesia, or we are moving towards from type 1 models to the type 2 models, wherein we can reach less than 10 ppm or even lower. So next is about the bottom upgradation. So if we talk about the different processes, I'll talk. So what are the catalyst prospects and where we need to look into? So if we talk about FCC, there is a RFCC catalyst. So to go for the more upgradation from the high CCR feeds, so the catalyst should have higher acidic matrix or use of higher rare earth, but the limitation is like we cannot go beyond, let us say 7 to 8% of the CCR or certain percentage of the metals, because this will lead to the higher coke, which in the resid FCC units also there will be limitation. So next is the fixed bed hydrotreating catalyst. So AR and BR can be processed, but the limitation is again on the catalyst cycle length, higher deactivation and the coke deposition. So there are the challenges for the catalyst scientist, and there is an opportunity also to improve on this catalyst. Next is about the ebullited bed catalyst. So it's a resid hydrocracking with a higher amount of the metals and the asphaltenes. So there the combination of the meso microporous catalyst support with a good crushing strength can give a higher conversion. But the major limitation will be the spent catalyst handling, because so much of the metals and the CCRs along with the metals has to be handled. And another limitation will be the sediment formation, because more than 1000 ppm will be difficult to handle. So there is again an opportunity and the challenge on the catalyst development. Next, catalyst development is related to the slurry hydrocracking. There the nano-sized metal sulfide in situ provides the higher surface area and the higher acid hydrocracking activity, and the conversion can go as high as 93 to 94%. But the major challenge will be the unconverted material, which we call pitch, 7 to 8%. How to valorize those pitch? That will help us into either in the catalyst development subsequently or in terms of the process development. So now I will put forward our HP Green R&D's approach towards the catalyst development in such area. So we are working into developing a low cost catalyst, and we are also putting up the scale of facilities wherein whatever the lab developed catalysts are developed at our lab scale can be easily scaled up. So that moves towards the Atmanirbhar Bharat proposition of the Government of India. So next, in the catalyst area, we are also working into the single atom catalyst for improving the atom economy, like for the CCR catalyst. And we are also working into AI and ML model prediction for predicting the catalyst formulation for the new research areas like CO2 to methanols and other things. Then we are also working into engineering the different planes of the crystals of the nano catalyst for improving the catalyst active centers, which helps into improving the activities. So we are also looking into the tandem and the hybrid catalyst, which helps in combining multiple reactions in a single reactor, like CO2 to DME or oligomerization reactions. We are also looking into heterogenizing the homogeneous catalyst for gaining technical advantage. That's the one key research area we are looking into. So the next area of research or the going forward is the process intensification. So if we typically see the definition of the process intensification, it's like any chemical engineering development that leads to a substantially smaller, cleaner, safer, and more energy efficient technology is called a process intensification. So broadly, it covers the design that optimizes the heat and the mass transfer, and it combines the multiple processing units into a single integrated unit operation. So it covers into the process equipments as well as the methods. So we can have a reactors, or we can have the equipment for the non-reactive operations, like there are various examples: static mixer, compact exchangers, centrifugal absorption. Or in the methods, we can have a multifunctional reactors which can cover into the various unit operations, or we can have a hybrid separation mechanisms combining various processes like membrane separation, membrane distillation, and absorptive distillation. Or there could be an alternate energetic sources like combining centrifugal force, ultrasounds, solar energy, microwaves, electric fields, plasma technology, or other methods like cavitation, supercritical fluid, or the dynamic operation. So now what is the benefits of the process intensification? If you see, it reduces the size of the equipment or the amount of the process equipment. It reduces the capex and the opex, and it has modular and the prefabricated, so the time for the construction of the such plants can be much lower. It increases the heat and the mass transfer. It lowers the hydrocarbon holdup, so that way it is very, very safe. It can achieve a single change in the corrosion management. So there are various examples like rotating packed bed, divided wall column, where we can, two columns can be combined into one. We can have a micro channel reactors, or the reactive distillation, where the reaction and the distillation can be combined into a single unit. So in rotating packed bed, HPCL is having the HP high gas process for removal of the H2S from the refinery of gas. So that's one technology we commercialized at our Vizag refinery as well. So the next topic of my discussion is the net zero measures. So where we are and where we are progressing in this direction. So if we see the major sources of the CO2 emission in the refinery, so this figure shows the different units which are the emitters of the CO2 in the refinery, like CDU emits around 21%, then FCC is 23%, then SMR, which is one of the biggest emitter of the CO2 per ton of the hydrogen. So these are like percentage of the CO2 emitted in the refinery. So broadly, if we see, like for producing for in 1 ton of the crude processing, almost like 200 kgs of the CO2 is emitted in the refinery. So there is an ample opportunity for us to reduce the emission, and there is a lot of research happening in this direction to make the refinery CO2 free or minimize the CO2 to the extent possible. So there are novel different separation technologies for the CO2 capture. Like one is the absorption process, which can comprises of the rotating packed bed or fiber film contactor, enzyme promoted amines, biphasic solvents, or the ionic solvent. Second could be the membrane separation, which can include the polymeric or the hybrid membranes, or different absorption process like vacuum PSA, TSA, carbon-based adsorbents, MOF materials. Then there are cryogenic separation like cryogenic distillation, supersonic inertial CO2 extraction processes. Then there could be a combination of the different process like the hybrid process, which can comprise of membrane plus cryogenic, or enzymes from plus membranes, or absorption or adsorption plus membranes. So these can help us into the CO2 capture from the refinery streams. So next is the co-processing of the renewable feedstock. So there is a lot of talk on these stuffs, and many refineries outside we are seeing they are going and implementing certain technologies into the refinery assets. So the co-processing of the biogenic materials with fossil will play a key role into the CO2 emission reduction from the refineries, and the transformation of these biogenic feedstocks and intermediate distillates to produce finished fuels, which will be having less CO2 footprints. So then there will be cost effective options utilizing the existing infrastructure to produce the renewable hydrocarbon fuel, and which do not require any add-on investment in the fuel distribution, because these kinds of the fuels coming from the renewables will be compatible, and the existing infrastructure can be used for movement and the transportation of these fuel. So down the line, we are, other than these fossil inputs, the inputs will come from the pyrolysis oil or triglycerides, fat-based oils, or the tail oils, which will produce the fuels having the biogenic component into this. So there is a talk and there is a caption like, it doesn't matter if the demand for the fuel declines due to more energy efficient engines, or advent of the electric or the hybrid vehicles, or ride sharing, or any new technologies. So all that matters is when this will happen and whether each refinery is ready for it or not. So down the line, if you see, right now we are processing crude oil. In future, to meet all these requirements and go towards the green and the less CO2 footprint, bio-based feedstock could be another feedstock, CO2 will be another feedstock, which is now waste, or any other waste streams. And down the line, we'll have a low GHG petrochemical feedstocks, low GHG products. So this slide basically shows the illustration of the concept of refinery of the future, wherein there will be hardly any waste, and all waste will be converted into a low GHG petrochemicals or the fuels. So with this, I'll come to the end of my presentation. Thank you for patience hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Pramod. Back to you, Dr. Bhavya.
Thank you very much, sir. You gave us a very positive overview of the fact that we all could move towards a low greenhouse gas emission future, and your comprehensive overview on the crude to chemical sector as well. Thank you. Our next speaker is also from the R&D sector, Dr. Reshmi Manna. She holds a master's degree in chemical engineering from IISc Bangalore. She joined the R&D Center of IOCL in 1998. She has more than 2 decades of research experience in various areas of refining technology, such as catalytic cracking, light end processes, supervalorization, light naphtha aromatization, isomerization, etc. Her area of interest covers developing new process technologies and commercially implementing the same in the refineries, adding value to the existing refinery processes by providing technical services for the selection of best catalyst, assessing the impact of change in feed or process conditions, process optimization, troubleshooting, etc. Ms. Reshmi was the team lead for concept to commercialization of Octamax technology, which was deployed in IOCL's Mathura refinery in 2018. She has received several awards like the National Awards 2022, recognized by TDB under DST for successful commercialization of indigenous technology, Petrofed Innovator of the Year, PIPI Innovator of the Year, CHT Innovation Award 2018 and 2019. She has a total of 28 national and international granted patents to her credit and several technical papers in national and international conferences. Thank you very much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation. The floor is now yours.
Thank you for the nice introduction. I think I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible and your slides are also visible.
Okay, thank you. So first a correction, I'm not doctor. I'm holding only master's degree in chemical engineering. Okay, yeah. Good afternoon all. And first of all, I would like to thank the organization for.
Ma'am, you're not audible now.
Is it okay now?
Maybe a little nearby, ma'am.
Because my speaker is in full. It's okay now? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then I will straight away go to the topic. Already my previous speakers have touched upon many of the aspects which I also they are in my presentation as well. So there will be some of repetition. So kindly bear with me. So my presentation will cover first the energy outlook, the current global scenario, and then the energy mix, that world vis-a-vis India, what is going to be the situation. Then the refining capacity, what's the outlook towards the refining capacity of India, and what are the major challenges being at present it's being faced by the refining sector. What are the key drivers of the refining technologies, and a glimpse into the future refining trends. This already has been explained by my previous speakers. This is a very recent that study report which has been published by BP Energy Outlook 2022. So different scenarios they have shown that most optimistic being the net zero, where the fall in CO2 emission has been estimated to be 95%, around 95% by 2050 relative to the value the level of 2019. And in the accelerated scenario, that's the fall by 2050 is 75%. But whereas the new momentum is the most realistic scenario. But anyway, what is the gist I want to talk about in this slide is that in all the scenarios, we are seeing the peak in the energy demand. Although the peak is different occurring in the different years, depending on the different scenarios. In the net zero, it's in early 2020s, and around 2013 accelerated, and mid 2040 the new momentum. So although we have this, there was impact of COVID-19 on the energy demand and all, and also because of this war and all, but generally it's well accepted that again it will come back to the original level what used to be before all this crisis. And this is actually the share of that how this that energy demand will be met by the different mix of energies. So as seen, that mainly it will be that energy demand will be met as it will be by the gas as well as other renewables, and expectedly there is a dip in the there will be a dip in the share of coal and oil, as we can see that till 2025 again the significant demand will so that oil will hold this key position in the energy mix, and beyond that also there is growth, although the growth will be much less, but still there are some growth there. And here it's this energy mix which is again predicted. This is the study by IEA, World Energy Outlook 2021. So if we see these world data, the total energy demand, the requirement increase CAGR is 0.8%. And there we see that the oil percentage in 2019, it's 29%. And in the 2040, that percentage is going to reduce somewhat from 29 to 26%. But when we are looking at the data of India, here basically that CAGR, that energy demand, because of all this population, GDP growth and everything, that energy demand rate is much higher than the world average. And also we see, although there is a significant decrease in coal percentage share of coal in the energy mix from 45 to 34, but oil is remaining same, 26%. So overall, if we see quantity, that oil demand will be continuing in India, at least for a few decades. And also, this the major that reason for this energy demand from oil is because of the demand of fuel. This is the step scenario. Already it has been explained by my previous speaker. So during from 2019 to 2040, we see that that fuel, that road transport energy demand, it is almost doubling from 2019 to 2040. And majority of the from 2019, it's a level of around 100 million tons of oil equivalent, and 2030 it's slightly above 150, and 2040 it's more than 200. And majority of that is being met by the gasoline and diesel. Although other this biofuels, electricity, everything is there, but if you see the contribution is mainly coming from the diesel, mostly from diesel and then gasoline. So as far as India is concerned, we will have this demand of these fuels from refinery, at least in the near future, near few decades. So in line with that, since demand will be continuing, so we are having that there will be continuous growth in the refining capacity. So presently we are at a value of around 250 MMTPA. That this also has been presented in the in my previous speaker slides. And from there, basically now we are targeting by 2030, it's 439 MMTP of refining capacity, whereas the domestic demand is 335. So excess will be exported. So that will give India the advantage for exporting. It will strengthen India's position for exporting the fuels, that refining products. And refinery, many of the refineries are under expansion, as we know. And this refinery expansion will focus on the process improvement, because we know that at the same time demand is there, but we need to fulfill all the requirements, also statutory requirements as well as the environmental requirements, all these norms, everything. So refineries have to focus on the process improvement, greener fuels, and of course petrochemical integration. So this has also been spoken about, so I'm not going through this. All these refineries which are there presently, total capacity being 249 MMTPA. So what is the present challenge? Because in my speech, actually, I look at it like in the two ways, because all this net zero and these things we are talking about, although we are in the process, but that's maybe the long-term future. And then there's a short-term things where there is no abrupt or drastic change we are envisaging, but at the same time, slowly transition will take place. So in this transition period, what are the challenges refinery is facing? So one is this crude, the volatility, because since there is a depletion of, and crude oil are coming from various unconventional sources also. So there is a changes in the quality, and that is becoming more and more inferior. So that's one of the greatest challenges. And also there is a decline, that expected decline in the fuel demand. Although we have seen that for the in Indian context, the net amount, there is no decrease, but then maybe in the growth rate, demand growth rate, there will be a decrease because due to the electrification and then ethanol blending in gasoline, and also the maintaining high equipment reliability in the refinery. That is for all these operating units. So that will also pose a great challenge in the refining sector in the near future. So what I was talking about is crude oil variability. So here we can see that how this with time, we used to get the very good quality crude where this API gravity was very high and sulfur also used to be very less. But now the scenario has been changed, and we are dealing with very feed crude oil containing very high sulfur, and also API is less. So to handle this kind of feed refinery complexity is keep on increasing, and the resid content in this crude, the portion of resid is becoming more and more higher. So we need to have all these processing units to convert this resid to the valuable products. So these are the typical refinery configuration. So as all of us are aware, so mainly there will be the treatment units, conversion units. Typically the conversion units will be hydrocracker, FCC, grease breaker, coker, those kind of things. And the treatment units are there, and we are having the light and processing units like isolation, reformer, alkylation. So from where we are getting the gasoline blending stock, and there may be other integration like lube and oxygen. So these are the typical view, typical block diagram of the current complex refinery. So now coming to what are the giving that the refining scenario. So what are the key drivers for the refineries? So first is the product quality specifications that has taken place in very recent past. So we have seen, although that has been again, I need not to repeat all this transition to BS6. So now India is in the BS Euro 6 equivalent BS6 regime. Both gasoline and diesel sulfur content is less than 10 ppm. And we have seen that how there has been the smooth transition from BS4 to BS6 for meeting this sulfur limit. And how they have done that, it's all these treatment units like DSDT, DHDS, either revamp, even the gasoline sulfur reduction unit like Prime G or catalyst changes, then OHC revamp, or and all this treatment requires more hydrogen consumption. So there has been revamp or new hydrogen generation units. Also, there was a revamp of VGO hydrotreater or new units. So this is the way the maybe past 3, 4 years, 5 years, refineries have made this kind of changes in the refining configuration. They've added the capacity or added altogether new unit in order to meet those challenges, meet those fuel specifications. So in this context, I'd just like to touch upon the technologies developed by Indian Oil R&D Center, which were focused for meeting this kind of fuel specification for the transition from BS4 to BS6 scenario and sustain the operation at the BS6 level. So these are the technologies we are having. Indi diesel, which is for production of ultra low sulfur diesel. Indi hex is production of a specialty polymer or food grade hexane. Then Octamax is for the high octane gasoline stream. Amylomix also is another technology, again production of high octane gasoline stream from light olefinic gasoline. Then we have in DSN, that is again production of ultra low sulfur naphtha. In DSK is the production of ultra clean kerosene. In ADEPT is the deep desulfurization of cracked gasoline through adsorption method. Inject is selective removal of mercaptan sulfur from ATF, and Inselect G is selective diolefin saturation technology. So we are having bouquet of technologies for different streams for either quality upgradation for sulfur removal or for octane improvement. And I will touch upon some of these technologies, the features of these processes in very brief. So like we are having individual technology here. So this, as I have already told, this is for production of ultra low sulfur diesel, sulfur of less than 10 ppm. And with a certain improvement of more than 10 units, there is optimized feed preheat scheme offering cost effective design, and the catalyst is our proprietary. But then the commercial catalyst also can be used in this unit. And the reactor internals are also proprietary. So starting with the first commercialization of this individual technology back in 2011, much before all this BS6 and these things, even before BS4, it came in the Bongaigaon refinery, and subsequently there were many more either grassroots or revamped units. So taking the cumulative capacity of industrial technology today to 8.26 mmTPA. Next is in-select technology for gasoline desulfurization. This is also very specialized technology for the selective diolefin saturation, as it is seen here. These are basically two-stage processes. In the first reactor, we are having SDS reactor for selective diolefin saturation. This is for upgradation of lighter gasoline, which selectively converts the diolefin in the total olefins, and the sulfur gets shifted to the lighter mercaptan, and LCN can directly go to MS pool, with typically having less than 30 ppm of sulfur. And also there is some kind of changes in the olefins. The alpha diolefins convert to central olefins, which enhances the RON also of this light stream, light LCN. And then after this SDS reactor, there is this separation, fractionation of LCN, MCN, and HCN. And HCN goes to the HDS reactor for selective hydro desulfurization, so that the sulfur is minimized, minimizing the olefin saturation. So there is not very high olefin saturation, so that the octane number loss is not very high. So this technology is very recently commissioned. 180 KT grassroots unit has been commissioned in Guwahati refinery very recently. Then we are having the Octamax technology for the gasoline octane enhancement. This is for product. This is a very simple technology requiring moderate capex and opex, where we use the cracked C4 stream coming from the FCC or poker type of unit, and that gets converted to gasoline range molecules, and that depending on if the feed sulfur is less, it can be directly blended to the gasoline pool. This technology was first commercialized in Mathura refinery in 2018, and subsequently there are many other plants upcoming, and there are the different stages of commercialization. Another significant this achievement of significant work done by Indian Oil R&D Center towards this fuel quality requirement by refineries is in the field of bunker fuel. As we know that with effect from Jan 20, there was specification for bunker fuel. Previously, it used to be 3.5% sulfur, but drastically it has been reduced from 3.5 to 0.5%. So the conventional approach for making this bunker fuel used to be the mixing the cutter stock with the low sulfur wear, but which require more of the cutter stock in order to maintain this 0.58%. So Indian Oil R&D Center came up with their own scheme by employing one idle visbreaker unit in the Gujarat refinery. That was revived, this 1 mmTPA VBU, and by this scheme, finally this bunker FO meeting that specification of 0.5% was produced. And I'm very happy to share that ISL became the pioneer refining company supplying MARPOL compliant bunker fuel in India from September 19, even before the IMO deadline of January 20. So these were the technologies which for the product quality enhancement and specification requirement. Now coming to the topic of integration with petrochemical complex. Already this has been covered in details by my previous speaker, Mr. Pramod Kumar. But nevertheless, I will also speak few points on this, what we are doing here. So this of a bit of statistics, and it shows that the markets, that polyolefin global markets. So petrochemical sector is projected to emerge as a primary driver of growth for the global oil and gas sector, accounting for more than a third of incremental oil and gas demand by 2030. If you see from this chart, so here the total oil demand is 9.6 by 2030 million barrels per day, 9.6 million barrels per day. And if you see this petrochemical demand itself is 3.2 of this total 9.2. And here this demand of all these petrochemicals, this is Asia Pacific is the largest market, and India is also fastest growing in the region, growing consumption of finished plastics, both consumer and in industrial sectors. So petrochemical will fuel the global oil demand over the next decade. That can be said safely. Has shown India has emerged as one of the world's most attractive markets for new petrochemical investments, with its significant import dependence and high demand growth. And the demand growth in India is projected 8% CAGR over the next 15 years. And here in this graphs, we see that the gap between import and demand. So many of the petrochemical products, we are basically dependent on import. And this gap is, it's very high. And this particularly for few products like PVC, PP, LLDP, and here we can see that this demand percentage variation from 2019-20 value to 2039-40. So it's a very high percentage requirement. And the change in percentage is very high for that import. So there is a requirement for production of petrochemical in-house in order to have the self-dependence in line with the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So coming back to how the refineries can help in increase in petrochemical production. So again, that as already talked on this by Mr. Pramod Kumar. So catalytic cracking is one of the unit which is very versatile in production of this petrochemical feedstock. So we can have mild severity where this is focused on the fuels like gasoline and diesel, but high severity crackers are focused for production of high LPG along with the propylene, ethylene, and other C4 olefins also. And gasoline and other fuels are less, gasoline and diesel, but gasoline octane number is very high. So in this area, Indian Oil R&D is having that flagship technology of INMAX, which produces light olefins, LPG and high octane gasoline from heavy streams. And also we have another technology called Indalene, which produces light olefins from the naphtha, lighter cut. So coming to INMAX, I think it's already maybe known by many. So it's a very flexible process, and it's riser, optimum riser, and there is all other process conditions like matching hydrocarbon partial pressure and minimizing hydrogen transfer reactions in order to increase the light olefins. And we use a proprietary catalyst in this technology. A propylene yield can be as high as more than 20%, depending on the feed type of the feed. And it can process wide ranges of feed, very heavy feed with CCR, high CCR also, and at the same time lighter feed also. And this gives the flexibility for the refine depending on the requirement, because the catalyst formulation also can be changed towards maximizing fuel or maximizing the petrochemical feedstock like ethylene, propylene, butylene. So that provides the very high flexibility. And in MAX, it started, the journey was started long back in 2003 in the Guwahati refinery with a very small scale demonstration plant of 0.1 MMTPA. And then we are having subsequently a very big plant of 4.17 MMTPA in Paradip refinery and 0.74 MMTPA plant at Bongaigaon refinery, and several other projects are in the pipeline at different stages of implementation, taking the total license capacity of INMAX till date 17.25 MMTPA. And then Indalene technology, it's ready for commercialization. Here, again, in the circulating fluidized bed configuration, that naphtha, olefinic naphtha is cracked to very high yield of propylene and high octane gasoline, which gasoline is again reaching BTX. So that also again presents the opportunity for integrating with petrochemical for recovering the aromatics. And this can be with respect to feed. It can take any type of cracked feed, so there is a flexibility in that. So the Indalene is also a technology which will be helpful for the future integration with the petrochemical. So this I'm not going to much details because this already have been explained by my previous speakers. The extent of integration has been shown. So depending on the requirement and the fund the refinery can afford, the feedstock availability, all these configurations, refinery can choose to what extent they can go for this integration with petrochemical. And there are these projects, some of the projects have been listed worldwide, which are expected, that high petrochemical intensity is very high in all these projects. So coming to crude to chemical routes, Indian Oil R&D also is having our own configuration that here from crude oil, by employing different technologies, all these technologies are in-house technologies. So I have given the generic name of them, but then we are having our own technologies for all of them. So here, and that vacuum, this thing can be processed in this resid hydrocracker, and then from then DCU also can be there in the configuration, and the VGO can be operated, the processed in the high severity FCC, and then there can be mild hydrocracking unit for the finishing of this from the gasoline, heavy gasoline range materials to extract the aromatics, and we have naphtha cracker for this BTX for aromatics complex. And from this configuration, 55 to 60 wet% chemicals can be produced. It's almost at par with the existing technologies from the crude oil. So now, then the last point is this bottom upgradation. Again, some of this has been already covered. So in the bottom upgradation, we are mainly having two technologies in the refining. One is delayed coking and another is resid hydrocracking, both having their pros and cons. Delayed coking is a very cheap option, whereas this yield of coke, which otherwise doesn't have much use, is very high. So that's the negative point. Residue hydrocracking, again, the fuel quality is great, but then it's a higher capex and opex intensive. And so there is need for improvement in these processes in order to enhance the refinery margin. So delayed cooking process, as I've already explained, that the objective of the process should be as low coke make as possible. So Indian Oil is again having their own delayed cooking technology, which has been commercialized recently in the Barauni refinery through a revamp project, and their anode grade coke has been produced, and by employing low recycle, but their coke, compared to the base case, the coke yield was reduced by 4.4%. And again, the energy consumption was also reduced by 37%. This is a joint technology by Indian Oil and EIL. And in one step further to this delayed coking technology, there is one more technology, this Int-Coker technology, which is again further lower coke make is possible by this additional reactor section, which changes the reaction kinetics within the coker, so that the coke make can be further reduced. And this is highly attractive IRR and payback period is possible from this technology. And utility requirement is similar to the conventional DSU. So this technology is ready for commercialization, and its commercialization opportunities are being explored. On this resid hydroprocessing, already it has been discussed by Mr. Pramod Kumar, so I'm not going to the details. Only thing this with this evaluated bed technology along with SDA, we are able to have conversion of 85 to 95%, and a couple of refineries are going to have this technology in the near future. But slurry bed technology is having their own its own complexities, but here the conversion is more than 95% possible, and Indian Oil R&D Center is working on this slurry bed technology. So, having said all about this, what are the recent trends, what we are doing. So now coming to the glimpse into the future refining trends. So maybe beyond 2030, what we are going to do. So we are having this national biofuel policy. MOPNG has issued the national policy of biofuel 2018, in which a target of 5% blending of biodiesel is proposed by 2030. And it has been stated in the policy that in-house produced used or waste cooking oil offers potential to be a source of biodiesel production. And biodiesel produces 78% less carbon emission from the conventional diesel. And in line with that, this LRE Petroleum Haryana to set up a biodiesel manufacturing plant based on used cooking oil and blending bio oil in the refining that along with this crude, that bio oil blending in the refinery feed is also another way of this biorefining. And talking about the green fuel, Honorable PM launched the National Hydrogen Mission on India's 75th Independence Day 2021, which aims to make India a green hydrogen hub. And this will help in meeting the target of production of 5 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030. And already IOCL is set to build the country's first green hydrogen plant, which will use the hydrogen will be produced by the water electrolysis, which will be again in turn powered by renewable energy. And this plant is coming in Mathura refinery. Mathura has been selected strategically owing to its proximity in the Taj trapezium zone for curbing the emission. And other than Indian Oil, these other players like RIL, GAIL, NTPC, L&T are also announced their plans for the green hydrogen production. And again, E20 blending, ethanol blending to 20% by 2025. That is again another mandate. It's not 2050, it should be 2030. Then adopting CCU's technologies. Again, this Indian Oil Gujarat refinery, blue hydrogen plant is being set up. Their hydrogen generation will be through this reforming natural gas, and the carbon capture will be along with that. So that's why it's being called blue hydrogen. And there is one game-changing technology for conversion of refinery off gas to ethanol by deploying fermentation. That plant is coming. That's the collaboration between IOC and LanzaTech USA. The first demo unit of 128 KLPD, that is 33 KTA capacity, is coming at Panipat refinery. And there are other options like this, because we know that the combustion, that CO2 is coming, the main source of CO2 in the refinery is coming from the combustion. And then when we are talking about this capturing this CO2, the main challenge is because of that concentration of CO2, because it's diluted with the other gases like nitrogen and oxygen present. So if we can, the combustion process itself can happen with the enriched oxygen, then we can have the flue gas, the carbon dioxide percentage may be high, which will make the CO2 capture process much more economical. So in that line, there are these options like oxycombustion, where oxygen-rich stream is used for regeneration rather than air. And in that case, the flue gases contain a mixture of H2 and CO2, which are easily separated through condensing. And another method is chemical looping combustion, where metal oxides are impregnated on the catalyst system, which oxidizes the carbon by reducing so that nitrogen direct contact with the air is not required at all. That metal oxide itself makes that combustion process viable. And also there is a dry reforming, where CO2 can be utilized for the production of hydrogen and syngas. So to summarize, I would say that that as we have seen that oil is expected to continue as major primary energy source for at least few more decades worldwide, and more so in India. And India is planning for, and because of this increased demand for both in fuel and petrochemicals, India is planning at almost 75% increase in its refining capacity by 2030, and which will strengthen India's position as net exporter of the petrochemical products. And in the short-term future, refineries have to reorient with the changing dynamics, like latest technologies, advanced catalyst needs to be used, and higher energy and operational efficiency is required. Then in the refinery configuration, flexibility is required as per the requirement of crude, the product demand, as well as the crude oil, because there is no control on the crude which we are getting to process. So that kind of flexibility should be there. And it has to be, it goes without saying that it has to be petrochemical intensive. And there can be value addition to other niche products also, like from the delayed cooker, the needle coke production, or lube production from the refinery. So those are the other products which can be thought of. And the refineries of tomorrow, beyond the coming few decades, maybe beyond 2030 or 2040, then the refineries of tomorrow, that this has to be oil to chemical. At least 70% of chemical production should be there from the crude, and the power which is getting that has to come from the renewable source rather than the fossil fuel generation power. Then green fuel like green hydrogen and those things has to come. Again, the biorefining, that fuel, the feed of the refinery there should be transition from fossil to the co-processing of other biofeed, renewable feed. And again, CCUs is required, as already I've discussed, for achieving the net zero. And also the CO2. CO2 will play a major role. Instead of looking at CO2 as the nuisance of the refinery, CO2 can be used itself for production, for conversion of CO2 to chemicals. Many of the things are in the research stage, and one project that I have already mentioned for the Lanzatech process from CO2 to ethanol. So this kind of process will gain more and more importance. And also the refineries has to be digitally connected facilities where through the cloud-based systems, there can be auto monitoring and the preventive maintenance also for the most optimum operation of the refinery. So these are the things which have come to my mind, that the future refining scenario, these are the must. So thank you, and thanks for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Rashmi Madam. Back to you, Dr.
Thank you,
Bhavya.
sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for a comprehensive presentation on showing us the path forward in the short, medium, and the long-term perspective as well. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Abhairaj Singh Bhandari, who heads the Bina Refinery, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, BPCL. He has 36 years of experience in refineries across India and abroad in different areas, covering operations, technology, projects, contracts, and purchases, etc. He's been involved in successful commissioning of several grassroots refinery operations at MRPL, NRL, BORL, and abroad. He has conceptualized, executed, and commissioned several capacity expansion projects, quality and efficiency improvement projects in various refineries. Sir, you may please now start your presentation.
Just give me a minute, Dr. Kavya, just by the time I share my presentation. Dr. Kavya, is it possible for you to share my presentation?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I hope it is visible and I'm audible.
Yes, sir. I
Thanks.
hope my screen is now visible to everybody.
Yes, it is visible, at least to me.
Yes.
So thank you, Dr. Anjan Ray, IIP, for giving us this opportunity. From BPCL refineries, I would like to share what we think about today's topic. See, over the last 2-3 years, we are seeing few very distinct changes which are happening in the refining industry, particularly from last 2-3 years. Panchamrit, which Dr. Anjan Ray spoke in the beginning, of our commitment to become net zero by 2070, that has brought in a lot of dynamism in the refining industry. And we are seeing that a lot of frenetic and feverish activities are taking place to achieve that prior to 2070. And certain companies have also made the commitment that by this year, they will achieve this net zero. And right now, all the companies, particularly BPCL, has started working with reputed consultants to chart out their net zero plans. And also, certain actions have been started on that, which I'll be covering in next slides. The second distinct change which we are seeing is that even though petroleum demand we see still is unabated, and still the demands of petroleum products is very, very healthy, but what we see is certain kind of seasonal variations. Particular time in the year, we find the demands of the petroleum products is quite good. There are certain times when the demand is not so good. Also, we are seeing that different points in time, they define the demand of different kinds of petroleum products goes up or comes down. In order to provide a hedge against this kind of varying demands and also to sustain the profitability of the refinery, we are seeing that a definite trend has started towards the petrochemical integration. And finally, now the buzzword in the refining industry is optimization and efficiency improvement. And digitalization is one of these strategies which all the refineries have adopted. Digitalization, in fact, is not new for the refining industry. At least from early 1980s, probably refineries were one of the first few to adopt to the digitalization when the entire analog kinds of control systems were converted to DCS, distributed control systems, and all the plant data was captured digitally. And from then onwards, refineries have always been very, very adaptive of digitalization. But now the pace with which it is being adopted is much more faster than what it was in the past. Can you go to next slide, Dr. Kavya? Yeah, please, next one. Yes. But we, as a refinery, we face one predicament. One is that even though there are talks that oil is one of the biggest contributors of greenhouse gases and there's a need to bring it down, but at the same time, we see that there's a healthy demand for this. And as PSU oil refineries, we have the responsibility to meet the energy sufficiency of the country and provide energy security to the country. Until the time the last person requires these petroleum products, we have to be there to supply this. Under these kind of contradictory or contrasting requirements, on one side, the requirement to reduce the energy consumption, fossil fuels, at the same time to meet the ever-growing demand of the petroleum products. So definitely we need to find out new models by which we can meet both the requirements. And certain solutions for this have also
Is the
Sir, we can't
connectivity
hear you.
lost or?
Sir, we can't hear you. Sir, are you able to hear us? We can't hear you.
am I audible?
Yes, sir, now you're audible.
Yes, I think we lost you for a bit.
Okay. So should I repeat this slide or I do not know till what time I was audible?
We lost you just on this slide, sir.
Okay, fine. So I was saying that we as a refinery, we face very, very contradictory requirements. On one side, the fossil fuel is considered to be one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases. But at the same time, we see that demand of petroleum products is very healthy. And what we foresee is that at least for next 20 to 25 years in our country, it is going to be healthy. Our considerations are very, very different from international oil companies because as PSU oil companies, we are required to provide energy security to the country until the time we have a person who requires last drop of diesel or any petroleum product, we have to be there to supply it. So under these contradictory requirements of cutting down the greenhouse gases, at the same time meeting the energy requirements of the people, new models of business are emerging. And what we see is that certain processes in refinery which are highly energy intensive, for example, hydrogen, which uh, Dr. Pramod has mentioned that almost 21% of the emissions are contributed by hydrogen generation. So replacement of these hydrogen generations from the reforming process to green hydrogen, which is electrolyzers. And to that extent, each refinery, they have started making their plans, and on trial basis, pilot basis, everybody has started implementing these electrolyzer projects. Similarly, second biggest contributor to emissions from the refineries is power generation and substitution of this power with solar power. And to take care of the fluctuations of the solar power during day and night from season to season, uh, the power banking arrangements are being finalized with the state governments. Similarly, uh, the fuels which are required in the refining processes. So capturing those carbon CO2 emissions from the fuel. So carbon capture through various technologies which were highlighted earlier, those are being thought of. But as we see that still these options are very, very costly, even though these are being taken on the pilot scale, but to go to full-fledged commercial scale, it is going to take some time. But refineries, they are preparing themselves for these changes. We also see that the penetration of biofuels which has happened. Already today we are at about 11% ethanol blending in MS, which is likely to go to 20%. Similarly, the biodiesel blending in diesel, these are also being progressed at a good pace. So while meeting the energy requirements of the country, at the same time meeting the net zero emissions target of the country, we see it will be possible, and certain actions for this are already started by the refineries. Can we go to next slide, please? So basically, there are four levers on which we are working to achieve these contrasting requirements. One is, as I mentioned, that our power sources, which takes almost about 20 to 25% of the energy, we have started switching to green power. At Bina Refinery, we have already implemented about 20 megawatt of solar, and we are also implementing about a 500 megawatt solar power plant, which will meet the requirement of not only our Bina Refinery, but at the same time Mumbai Refinery and Kochi Refinery also. And for that, we have taken advanced actions, and shortly we'll start the work on these things. Also, we are in discussion with state governments to take care of the banking provisions so that day and night this can be taken care. Similarly, for green hydrogen, we are planning to implement a 20 megawatt electrolyzer plant at Bina, and Bina location is going to be the central location which will meet the requirements of Mumbai Refinery as well as Kochi Refinery. The third lever which is available with us is improving our operational efficiency and energy efficiency. And one of the steps which we had committed was that reducing our energy intensity by almost 45%. And this will be achieved by increasing the energy efficiencies in the refinery with various technologies and tools in hand. And these things will require substantial investment. So we will have to manage our board and shareholder expectations to get sufficient allocation of funds so that all the requirements which are there can be met with this. Can we go to next slide, please? This already enough has been spoken about it. So what we in BPCL we are doing is that our petrochemical intensity is just about 3 to 4%, and we have planned to take it almost to about 25%. For that, we are planning to establish ethylene cracker plant at Bina Refinery, which will gradually raise the petrochemical intensity of our refineries to a level of about 25% from current about 6 to 8%. Next slide, please. So Dr. Reshmi Manna also had shown this. Currently, we started with the bottommost of the pyramid. That means we started with the fuels refinery. And afterwards, certain refineries, they have started implementing benzene, toluene, xylene extraction and polypropylene through petro-FCC or deep catalytic conversion. Thereafter, now we have started seeing a distinct trend of integration of steam cracker along with the refinery, which recently we have seen for HMEL refinery at Bhatinda, and also Rajasthan refinery is coming up with this. Indian Oil's Panipat refinery was already there in this. And then finally, combining refinery along with olefins as well as BTX complexes and crude oil to chemical. Already we have started seeing certain developments taking place in China as well as Singapore, where the light crude oil straight away can be processed in the steam cracking unit to achieve higher level of petrochemical integration. Next slide, please. Refineries are also preparing themselves for co-processing of biofeed stocks, which are coming from various sources. It could be used vegetable oils, which will require changes in the hydrotreating and hydrocracking catalyst. Similarly, various other things, whether it is bio oils or whether it is lignin or it is glycerol. So there will be enough flexibility in the refinery as and when the requirements of processing these things come, the refinery will be in a position to adopt and process by minor changes in configuration with major changes in the catalyst development. So we foresee that the refineries are flexible enough to take care of bio feedstocks, which will be coming in future. The next slide, please. Ethanol blending, we have already discussed. There is enough ethanol potential in the country. We are in a position, as we estimate from the available biomass in various parts of the country, there is enough potential to generate about 3,525 crore liters of bioethanol, whereas the requirement which we foresee up to 2021 is almost about 880 crores liter. So to meet 20% ethanol blending requirement in MS by 2030, we do not foresee any shortage of bioethanol. In fact, our experience has been quite encouraging when we went for procurement of bioethanol, and number of entrepreneurs, they came forward and they established facilities for production of ethanol, because of which we were able to meet the 10% bioethanol requirement in MS blending ahead of its time. And currently it has reached to the level of almost 11 to 12%. Apart from energy security, there are so many other benefits of blending ethanol, whether it is reducing the emissions, or it is additional revenue, or employment generation. Next slide, please. So finally, the efficiency improvement through digitalization. This is also one trend which we have seen has come very, very strongly in the refinery culture. And now we are seeing that adaptation of digital technologies is across various requirements, whether it is health, safety, and environment, where various technologies we see particularly this revolution is being done by a number of startups, where number of companies are working to along with the industry hands in hand to meet the industrial requirement. For various hazardous services, for example, if it is cleaning of tanks where the possibility of poisonous gases is there. So robotic technologies have been developed, and these have been very successfully employed in our tanks for cleaning. So those places where we were to send people with subjecting them to a lot of hazards, these things are being done through robots. Similarly, we are seeing a lot of efficiency improvement taking place in the critical installations like refineries with the application of video analytics based security systems. Whereas to man a periphery of about 12 to 15 kilometers of our boundaries, which we were requiring about 200 odd security guards. These things have been replaced with the cameras, smart cameras, which are having various analytic based features. So similarly, when it comes to asset reliability management, we are seeing that to improve the reliability of the equipment, predictive analysis is being implemented in the equipment. And based on the data collected from the instrument, we are able to precisely predict that when this equipment is about to fail. And then we can take certain preventive maintenance based on that analytics. So these are some of the examples where very successfully we have applied digital technology for operational efficiency. We are now having digital twins. That means exact replica of the plant is available in digital form, where we can see the impact of one cause and how it is going to affect. If we change the crude or the feed to a plant, what kind of changes we can expect, anticipate in the plant. So this has improved the reliability and also the operational efficiency to a large extent. Project management now is fully digitalized. The projects which earlier were taking 5 years, 6 years to implement, now with the help of better monitoring, we can do it within the scheduled time. So these are some of the trends which, as refiner, over last 2-3 years we have seen. And with this, I think this was my nice slide. So thank you very much once again, IIP, Dr. Ranjan, Dr. Kavya, and my fellow panelists for this opportunity. Thank you.
Very exciting talk, Abhiraj. Dr. Bhavya, back to you.
Thank you very much, sir. We realize that there is a lot of opportunities that are available in the digitalization of a refinery and how a four-pronged effort is required in this transition to decarbonization. Sir, I now request Director Dr. Anjan to maybe we can have a small panel discussion, sir, with our esteemed speakers. Sir, we're not able to hear you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhavya. Are there any questions in the Q&A box? Because I don't see it from here.
No, sir, we do not have any questions in the Q&A box as of now.
All right, because you should be able to locate that. But if there are no questions, I think let me start with the last talk, where Mr. Abhiraj Singh has really brought out 2 or 3 particularly important points. One is the energy access obligation of the country and of the public sector refiners to deliver fuel to the last mile, to the last person, and at the same time to deliver shareholder value through reorientation of the assets to maximize profitability. All the talks that we heard, starting with Mr. Raman, have also stressed on the innovation, R&D, engineering, and digitization concepts. So rather than go to individual questions for individual speakers, I'm going to place the question and ask that be placed in reverse order, starting with Mr. Abhiraj and then going to Ms. Rashmi, Mr. Pramod Kumar, and Mr. Raman. And the key question is that regardless of what we do, the current reorientation of refineries is going to keep us dependent on imported crude oil for a very long time to come. what do you see as the possible strategy for reducing the import content of the refineries, even as we reorient towards petrochemicals and the energy transition? So let us start with Mr. Abhiraj Singh.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Ray. What I feel that certain steps which have been taken by the government of India, for example, the ethanol blending and also biodiesel blending, these are two things which to a large extent will reduce, because if we blend 20% ethanol in MS, the requirement of production of MS from the fossil fuel that comes down by 20%. Similarly, the biodiesel that also brings down diesel consumption. A good amount of fuel or is also used for power generation. At the same time, it is also used for generation of hydrogen. So replacement of these power sources with solar, which we have plenty, and replacement of hydrogen to the electrolyzer, which also will have good potential based on the solar potential of the country. And I feel that improvement in energy efficiency, the switch to electrolyzers for hydrogen, solar for power, and bioethanol, biodiesel, coupled with the improvement in energy efficiency and optimization. With this, to a large extent, we can reduce the dependence on the fuel oil or the crude.
Thank you. So in effect, if we are importing X number of carbon atoms today, what you're saying is that we partially decarbonize by replacing the energy utilization of those carbon atoms with alternate energies like solar, and we replace the fuel version of those carbon atoms with indigenous carbon atoms such as ethanol.
Right.
Right? But again, if we do the numbers, we are today importing about 250 million tons of crude oil, which is about 220 million tons of carbon atoms. And probably, if I were to replace 20% of petrol with ethanol, I only replace about 8 million tons of carbon atoms. So we still have a long way to go. And I would ask maybe Ms. Manna for her views on how can we reduce imported carbon atoms faster.
Really a challenge. In fact, yeah, means one option is like many of the speakers have addressed that adding more of bio that feeds in instead of that fossil source in the refining. So maybe that's one of the things that bio oils like this used vegetable oil, that's already the mandate is there and the plant is being set up for that, processing that. And with the co-processing, even in R&D center also, we have taken many projects in the past also and now also, that the co-processing of different biomass or bio-based feedstocks along with our conventional refinery feeds in the different secondary processes. And also other than bio, like this pyrolysis as that recycling also. So those things will also play a important role. So pyrolysis oil processing also we have done in our one of the, in fact, it has been demonstrated also in one of the northeastern refineries, the cooker unit that has been done. So that can be one other option. But all these things will, but I can expect that it will only marginally maybe reducing, but that huge reduction of crude import, maybe unless means we are switching to some other sources of energy or like that, really not sure that how it can be done.
Thanks, Ms. Manna. I would like to suggest that all the oil companies also look at actively integrating biofuel contract farming. That means, see, in the country today, we have 40 million hectares of irrigated land, which grows only crop per year. So the oil and energy companies start planting extensively or encourage planting extensively of biofuel crops, whether it be biomass crops or oil seeds or others, we might be able to decarbonize faster. or rather reduce import carbons faster. That is something I did not hear in the strategy from any of the four speakers, particularly for CHT. Maybe there is a need to integrate further with the agricultural system and the biomass production systems in the country so that we can move away from imported crude. Otherwise, going from crude to fuels over to crude to chemicals will still leave the crude as a constant. And that is something I would like to park as a thought. Let us go to Mr. Pramod Kumar and hear his views on this.
Sir, what we see, like you talked about 220 metric tons of the carbon atom. So probably, in my opinion, I feel biomass has a lot of potential. So there are various pathways to convert this into various fuels. Like either it can be converted into biogas, which can decarbonize the sector, or it can be converted into a biofuel, like through pyrolysis or hydropyrolysis, that can reduce the fuel demand or increase the transportation fuel. That's another approach. One of the areas I feel like plastic to fuel, that is not very much commercially exploited. So probably there is a potential to look into that. That can reduce the consumption, and it can act as another source of the carbon atom. Then CO2 valorization, there are various pathways, and recently I have seen few publications coming from China. They are putting up a demo plant to convert CO2 to the hydrocarbons. Probably there is a need from the R&D side to look into those aspects that can reduce the dependency on the carbon atoms. Then another, like from our R&D side, we are just watching for one technology, crude to chemical, wherein instead of having so many units in the refinery, we should go for a single unit. So that will reduce the carbon intensity or the carbon footprint, and this will bring a lot of efficiency in the system. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Pramod. Yes, I did think that HP quote, your integrated crude to chemicals thing sounds very, very exciting, and congratulations on having that as a patented entity in the HPCL R&D offering. Mr. Raman, you get the last word on this topic, on how do we reduce the number of imported carbon atoms in our fuels plus petrochemicals pool.
83% we are depending on imported crude. So only one way is increasing the domestic oil production as well as gas production. That is first option. Second, coal, you have to convert into methanol. So that will reduce substantially the oil imports. Third, major one is converting renewable energy, biofuel. Well, it will be a fraction of the requirement. Major, we have to depend on solar. Electric vehicles, big pathway breakthrough comes in technology and electric vehicles or something, that will reduce the burden on transportation sector. Another, green hydrogen, that will reduce heavy vehicles and requirement running on diesel and locomotives through hydrogen, through green sources. These are the only steps that can reduce importing crude oil carbons.
Thank you, Mr. Raman. I think that we have some clear alignment and common ideas here. And I hope that the next time we hold such a program, maybe 25 years from now on the 100th anniversary of India's independence and the centennial, the story would be very different. And the foundations of the bricks that you have laid and the other speakers here and their organizations are laying today will have grown into large monuments of a decarbonized, energy self-reliant economy. We are almost out of time, so I hand back to Dr. Bhavya for the summing up.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, everybody, for taking out and sparing your valuable time and sharing with us your ideas and views on how we can safely transit to a net zero emission sector by 2070 as per our commitment. I think as a young researcher, I have had the opportunity to identify several areas of research that can be taken forward, and probably there are several areas of collaboration as well between all the organizations and CSR IIP, as we are an R&D organization as well. So with this, I also take this opportunity to thank my director, Dr. Anjan Ray, for being with us throughout the session and making it a useful session for all of us. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you once again to all the speakers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Thank
all. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.